Now let's talk about the superhuman history of Earth. Let's talk about those periods that go beyond, that are maybe in the myth, maybe in these archaeological sites that we can find the pieces. So in this final segment, we go deep into the hidden past, the superhuman history of our planet. For the planetary princess staff to Adam and Eve's divine mission, Earth's story has always been intertwined with celestial intervention. We'll uncover how these beings shaped civilization, faith, and the unfolding plan of spiritual evolution, and what their legacy means for us today. So this is interesting, and throughout our conversation, we've said words, or we mentioned things like Adam and Eve, planetary prince, Lucifer rebellion, midwayers, angels. So how do we put all this together? How do we see a timeline, and how do these parts of celestial history or divine history or superhuman history have evolved in our planet? And just to note, what we're going to be doing in this part of the conversation, Susan, is we're going to kind of put a timeline, and we're going to show kind of the path of the superhuman history, so people kind of map it out. So, in a way, take us from the beginning, if there ever was a beginning. Can you tell us a little bit of the history of our Earth, if you can, in a little bit, in a nutshell?
Well, we'll do it quickly then. Our original race, the first two human beings, began over 900,000 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and at 500,000 years ago, the races emerged from one family, and the planetary prince arrived with his staff.
Okay, who's the planetary prince? Just parentheses there. What
I hate
happens in this stage?
Planetary prince has a name, and I hate to even say the name, but his name is Caligastia. Everyone
Mm-hmm.
refers to him as the devil.
Okay.
Let's just refer to him as the devil from now on. And he arrived with an assistant
Okay.
and his staff of 100, and then they brought with them the tree of life, and that was
Okay.
elemental to remaining alive. So the prince doesn't need that because he's a celestial being. He's a spirit.
Okay.
And that's another thing too. Let's do quickly. He is a created son from the being we know as Jesus, from
Okay.
Michael. A lot of people give him all this power, but he is not equal to Jesus.
Exactly.
He's not equal to that creator power.
He exists, but he's not in equal stance with God, with
Right? He's
Jesus.
not an angel. He's not an angel. He is a created son of a different type.
Okay.
And just as Melchizedek's are a different type of celestial son of Jesus. Let's call him Jesus. Um, so anyway, these beings all were created in under him and not as powerful. We know Gabriel is also a child of the mother spirit and Jesus as well.
Okay.
He's the first one. He's the powerful. He's the loyal. Anyway, so
Okay.
the devil, let's call him the devil. They went on for 300,000 years doing what they should do, and everything was progressing well. The staff had created the original midwayer core of 50,000.
Okay.
Within their DNA and within the plan for the future, the staff were going to create biologically children at some point along the way. But in those early days, there was so much work to do, and the midwayers were very helpful in accomplishing that. But they were not allowed or given the permission to begin that. But that was
Okay.
a it was a meant to be a future core of leaders for us. That
Okay.
never happened in that regard. But okay, let's say that the rebellion occurred. Our
Okay.
planetary prince, the devil, joined a system-wide rebellion. At
The
that time,
Lucifer Rebellion.
the Lucifer rebellion.
I think this name is more common to a lot of people. Yes.
Well, a lot of people believe that the devil i- is Lucifer and Satan, and in
Beelzebub and
the Bible it's Beelzebub and all these names. What they really don't understand is that they're all separate beings. Lucifer was the system sovereign.
the head of the
Satan
rebellion.
is the system. And Satan came and actually recruited the devil, Caligastia, to join. And I will say this, Caligastia had worked on Lucifer's staff before he was assigned as a planetary prince here. So he had personal relationship with Lucifer, and it's to his eternal discredit that he joined eagerly the rebellion and destroyed everything that they had built for 3,000 or 300,000 years.
Yeah.
So anyway, at that time, his staff was torn between loyalty and
The
disloyalty
war in heaven.
for war in heaven. And this included the angels, everybody that worked on the planet had to make a choice. And so about 40 of his staff, led by Van, which was the name of one of his, you know, he was a group leader basically of a certain responsibilities. We
Okay.
could get into that later, but Van led the loyal group, and Nod led the disloyal group. That
And it's funny that it's the same word that we find in the Bible, right?
in the land of Nod, right?
Okay.
So, there was the tree of life was seized by the archangels and by the angels and by Van and his group, and that kept them alive for over 100,000 years.
Okay.
And they are the ones that actually worked for a long time to build the Garden of Eden and prepare it for the days when Adam and Eve would arrive. They had
Okay.
the tree that could stay alive. Now, the others, this is where some of the stories and the myths come in. The
Okay.
land of Nod, there were the people that were Nod, Nod's group, went ahead and mated and created children like had been planned, but in this case, these really were superhuman beings. And it talks about them, the mighty men of old, the men of renown.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
all of that happened, and they said they knew they didn't have the tree of life to stay alive. So the only way they could preserve their race was to go ahead and mate and have children, even though they didn't have permission to do that yet.
Okay.
And that was part of the process to survive. Now, I will say at one point, one part of that group broke away and went back to the loyal group of Van. They
Okay.
realized they had made a mistake. And so part of the Nod group were good. And so now you mentioned giants earlier. That was a natural evolution thing that came out of the orange and green races.
Okay.
That was built in basically to the evolutionary process. But so there is stories and myths of giants, and it really was true. There were giants, but these ancient beings. Now, a lot of people will say, "Where did this Egyptian culture come from that's so far advanced?" And
Yeah.
where did the Mayan culture come from? And this and that. Well, many of those ancient cultures were the supernatural cultures that had
Exactly.
evolved over time from this group of the Nodites that had, they were responsible for the Tower of Babel that people know in the Bible. They couldn't agree about, w- they couldn't agree. So they separated. Anyway, so they moved to different places and all that. But the second group of superhumans that we really can track is from Adam and Eve's oldest son. After, they defaulted in their mission, they were tricked. He moved away to try to find the good Nodites. He had heard about the stories in his childhood. He knew where to find them. He found them, and he found a pure line Nodite woman that had come down from all the way from the staff. I mean, a pure line. And when they married, their children every fourth one was invisible. Now I know this sounds crazy, but they
Yeah.
when they married, their children were the second group of midwayers. They were actually
Okay.
invisible.
So they had that quality. Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah,
So wait, before I mean, because you're now talking about Adam and Eve's son, so you're talking about this evolution in the history, and we get to the rebellion, and suddenly you have this war, and you have this loyal group, and kind of retook power, and there's just like a civil war, let's say, and not
that's
it's there's no control, and then you have these biological uplift lifters, which are the material son and daughter, Adam and Eve that come and uplift the races, right? That's the history.
That's right. Well, and Adam and Eve's, all of their progeny,
Yeah,
you
their
can
offspring. Yeah.
look right back to them for all of the ancient cultures that were like we look at and say, where did they come from? All of that is the result of Adam and Eve's blood.
Yeah, you see it
What
everywhere. I mean, and this is very popular right now. Everywhere you see it in YouTube and all the different channels. It's this ancient alien history and ancient civilizations, and every story has these cataclysm, which you can see it. I mean, if there was a rebellion and there was this default and this conflict, that's what we hear in the stories of history. And why don't we have the record straight? Because there was a lot of confusion. I mean, imagine it was one of the biggest wars. What kind of confusion and distortion and destruction are you going to have if that happens? So it's pretty interesting to understand all of this and to see how everything evolved. So you're saying that there's this rebellion, then Adam and Eve come and they try to do their stuff, which is try to uplift, but they have a default, which is what? Maybe they didn't bite an apple per se, right? But they defaulted. They did commit a crime, right?
it they had a mission to come here and
Okay.
to have children. They had actually children on the system headquarters before they came here and were assigned and volunteered for this work. They had worked in the labs of the life carriers. They were genetic specialists, biologic experts. That's how, in the biblical story, Adam was able to name all the
Yeah, exactly. That's
animals.
the point of naming because he's
Yeah,
creating the animals.
he really awed everyone because they both actually were equal in their expertise. But they awed everyone at that time because they knew everything already and spoke to them in their own language, even. And they were just in awe of them and wanted to worship them immediately because they were so, we tend to want heroes and we want someone
Exactly.
to worship, obviously in
Exactly.
those days long ago. But all of their kids, and they were instrumental in developing all of those ancient civilizations that were so wonderful. And gradually, as the bloodlines absorbed into the evolutionary races, they lost their power, they lost
Yeah.
their excellence, basically, and they devolved back to a normal evolutionary stage. Now, if the mission had been that they would build up their race, the violet race, to a half a million, and then those children, not Adam and Eve themselves, but those children would go out into the world and select the best. And through that method, and it was very controlled and it was very intentional to help eliminate disease and to create a really strong and noble race. And they went off the rails really quickly within
Uh,
100 years or
And let me
so.
and let me make a disclaimer here. By creating a great race, we're not saying just one type of race. We're talking about the mixing of all races that really brings the best race in everything. It's not excluding a race; it's including all races to become the best. The best qualities of all races come out and make the best every iteration. You get a better part of the past,
Right.
right?
And exactly. Each race has many, many strengths that would contribute to the eventual amalgamated race that I mean, in the times of the ages of light and life, they think that we will have one language, one faith, one race. And of course, that's, far in the future. But the goal is to become amalgamated, and all races are going to be involved in that. We're already blending. So it's not to exclude anyone, but to include everyone. Back to, we're the same family anyway. So there's no sense in saying anyone's superior.
Yeah, yeah,
It
exactly.
doesn't true. We're all
So
brothers and
so what happened then? What was the default of Adam? And I think, I mean, this is when you tell us about this, we're gonna leave the history of our Earth in Adam and Eve, because there's a lot of more history. But I think that's gonna be in another podcast, because I don't want to cut short Melchizedek, Jesus, or any more of the history. But let's close this off with, what was the default? What was that apple that they ate?
Okay, the problem was, and they had been warned repeatedly by the angels that were on duty, to just Adam and Eve were to only mate with each other and to create the pure line children. And then the pure line children, without disease or without any problem like that, were able to mate with each other with no problems. Like,
Okay,
human evolutionary would have a problem if they mated with brothers and sisters, but they didn't have that problem because they were perfect specimens, and they without disease or without any weakness at all. So Adam and Eve, they were cut off from the communications from outside. They had angels that were here that were,
but
you
why
know,
were they cut off? What happened? So they were told not to accelerate and to keep. So what happened?
they were told specifically to stay with their mission to get to 1 million or 1/2 million. Adam and Eve never to mate with anyone else, only with each other. And what happened was Eve was tricked into a secondary plan to mate with an evolutionary male that was chosen, and it was put to her as, how much sooner could
How
they
faster
get,
can you accelerate this process? Right?
and I think we're used to this in our history. For peaceful methods, kings used to send their daughters to marry the prince of another country so that there would be an alliance between them, a working alliance that was peaceful. And that was put to Eve in that manner, that we had this alliance and you had a child, with this people, then you could count on them to be helpful to you, because it wasn't easy in those days.
Yeah.
The devil was strategizing against them at
You have
every
to
turn.
think it's a civil war. There's a confusion. There wasn't Jesus wasn't here yet, and there was a lot of things happening. Yeah.
That's true, and the rebel midwayers were wreaking havoc,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
well against Adam and Eve.
Yeah, there
S
were there were actually like, even still they were pushing, and how they're influencing some of the times what happens nowadays. So they influenced her, and she defaulted. And basically what you're saying is that she procreated with somebody other than Adam, and that
Right.
broke everything. She defaulted, and what happened? This is interesting.
It's a very sad story because, she believed she was doing well. She didn't mention it to Adam, and that had been warned to her over and over and over again, that things were tough, but never do anything separate from Adam, unless you've consulted with him and you both agree. They both were warned not to do anything separately, that they would help each other, but he thought, things were very tough. He was so busy working, trying to establish relationships with groups around that were very hostile.
Yeah.
It was not the norm for them when they arrived on this planet. They had been warned it was going to be tough, but I think they didn't realize just how tough
How tough? Yeah,
it was.
exactly. And uncommunicated, civil war. I mean, it's tough, and they took a bad decision, and that they defaulted. Yeah.
Right. And so she went through with this, and immediately the angelic hosts were in a, they knew there was a problem. And Adam sensed it immediately, and he came and he said, what happened? He could tell there was a problem. And she admitted what she did. And they knew that, other than the perfect way is evil. And that is a default of their perfect mission, their oath. And so he decided, now he had a choice at this point. This is very sad because he loved her so much, he wanted to share her fate. They didn't know exactly what the fate would be at that time, but he knew he loved her so much that he wanted to share her fate instead of staying here alone if she was taken from the planet, or he didn't know exactly what would happen. So he found a woman that was an evolutionary woman and mated with her at the same time so that no matter what happened, he and Eve would remain together.
Yeah, they were both guilty. Like Romeo and Juliet, they both drank the poison, right?
It's really a true love story between the two of them, but actually it made a big difference in the future health of our people. If Adam had been able to stay and he was still alive now, and there could be a much greater amount of blood of his blood,
Yeah,
and
history
you
would
know,
be different. Yeah,
yeah,
but this is interesting, and we're about to finish off, and because we're gonna take it later from this part on the default, and where you're gonna tell us what happened afterwards. But I just wanted to close off with, reflection on the story of the Garden of Eden. The tree of life, the snake, the serpent, which is the devil, and the temptation. And as a kid, I always, and yeah, I love archetypes, and I studied a lot of the mythical archetypes, and to me, the serpent always represented like a sexual symbol. It wasn't really the apple, and to me, it was like kind of elemental. Oh, you bit an apple, and the forbidden fruit, and you look at human interaction, and the forbidden fruit is really, thou shalt not covet your neighbor's wife, and I mean, it's more along on those lines. So you have that element of the forbidden fruit, you have the element of the snake, which is sexuality, and in a lot of cultures, that's the snake, that's how it's represented. So you see that the story, this story that you told us, that it has to do with a sexual default. The clues are in the story. The serpent, the forbidden fruit, everything. If you look really at the mythical archetype of the story of Adam and Eve of Garden of Eden, it's written in there. There is the story of that default. Maybe it's not that they were the first humans, and that's where we are all originated. There were a step in this vast history of the universe, of the earth, actually, that we now understand much clearer.
right. And that goes back to the tree of good and evil, and
Yeah,
I mean, honestly, it's not a fruit. It's making a choice that's evil, and
exactly, exactly.
yeah, was not
Yeah.
according to the mission.
Yeah, yeah, I love that, how, and that's what's beautiful, and why we shouldn't take the Bible or any religious text, the myths, and because there's clues in them of what really was happening, and of course, throughout thousands of years, everything gets graded down, or distorted in a way. But if you take it down, and you look at the mythical archetypes of the structure, the information is there, and it's really beautiful, and it really resounds differently with all different people. So
Yeah,
really excited about this, Susan, and we have a lot of stuff to continue. So we're gonna have to do a second part of this and talk a little bit more on the history of our world, and then I want to talk about the interaction, how we interact as humans with all these celestial beings, because I think it's interesting why what kind of job we do with each one. That's kind of fun. All right.
that'll be fun. I would like to say real quick for those that are
Sure.
listening, there is a happy ending for Adam and Eve, so we'll tell them all about that later.
Yes, same time next, same channel. Yes, we're gonna tell you the what eventually happened, and then the next part of the story of the Earth. All right,
Sounds
but
good.
thank you, Susan. This was really lovely. It's a pleasure as always. Really enjoyed it.
I did too. Thank you.
And thanks everybody for watching. Like always, subscribe if you liked it. Be sure to also put the notifications, so you know when we're gonna take out a new information, new program. And thanks for watching. Tell people that if you liked it, what you saw over here, maybe they might be inspired. And thank you. I'm Santiago Kneeland. Take care and carpe diem. On the Divine Within podcast, we share real conversations to help you find a personal connection with God. My goal is to support your faith, growth, and journey toward discovering the divine within yourself. Join us to deepen your faith and spiritual journey.